Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video today, I'll be talking about compliance, specifically compliance in the community sector, what compliance is, and how is it affecting your job role in the community sector industry. I would also be touching base a little bit about legal and ethical considerations, but I would also have a separate video about legal and ethical considerations for those who want to dig deep into that. In this video, we would only focus about what compliance is, what are the different types of compliance, and how is that relevant to anyone working in the community service industry. Now to begin with, I would start by defining the compliance. You might be wondering, why do you need to learn about compliance? If you are working in community sector, it is important that you're aware about your job scope and you research about the duties that you have to perform in your role. Only then you would know what sort of compliance areas falls under you. Now compliance in general is what? In general sense, it may mean abiding by a set of rules. Now there are a set of specific industry standards, laws, regulations, and ethical conduct standards which are applicable to each specific industry. Here, if you read it, compliance simply refers to conforming to these laws, regulations, and guidelines and the standards which are applicable to your specific sector. Now, it entails adhering to prescribed rules, fulfilling obligations to ensure legal and ethical conduct in organizations' operations. To give you an example, while working in the community sector, you may have to ensure that as a support worker, you're complying with organization internal policy and procedures while also meeting the minimum standards set by the relevant government departments. For those who are working in community sector, may be aware about some legal and ethical compliance considerations. For example, privacy and confidentiality of the client, where ensuring the privacy of the client would be a legal compliance. This is just one example, but when it comes to community service, there are lots and lots of legal and ethical considerations, and we would be talking about them, like I said, in depth in a separate video. But now, before we talk about those ones, we will simply touch base about different types of compliance and what are the compliance requirements in your job role. To begin with, it is important to have a copy of your PD, which is position description, because that gives you a lot of information about what your duties and responsibilities are. Once when you're aware about that, only then you know what are the areas relevant for you in order to maintain the compliance. Now in this video, I will be covering what legal and ethical compliance is. Legal compliance is basically following the law, whereas ethical compliance is doing what is right. Legal compliance is something that the government requires you to do. It is imposed by the law and the acts, for example, the Discrimination Acts or the Privacy Act 1988 or the Fair Work Act 2009. Whereas ethical compliance, on the other hand, is something you choose to consider when taking actions. And this compliance is guided by a person's values, beliefs, and moral system. Legal compliance is driven by the government, whereas ethical compliance is driven by the individual, and both are necessary concepts in any successful organization. Now, the first type that I would want to cover here in compliance is the legal compliance. What is a legal compliance? This involves adhering to laws at the local, state, and federal levels. Now, it includes compliance with labor laws, taxation requirements, health and safety regulation, and any other legal obligations which are relevant to your operations. So, in community sector, what are these areas where you'd have to be legally compliant? These are the areas which are related to privacy of your clients, disclosure of the information, obtaining the informed consent of the client, maintaining the records, and the incident reporting. These are some of the areas which are important for legal compliance in community sector. Now the next one that we have after legal compliance is regulatory compliance. A lot of people get confused about a law and regulation, so it is important to understand what's the main difference first. For the regulatory compliance, we have to refer to adhere to specific regulations that govern the activities of organizations within the community sector, and this could include the compliance with regulations specific to healthcare, social services, education, or any other area in which the organization operates. A law is a set of rules which are given in the Act and tells us what needs to be done and what not needs to be done, whereas a regulatory body is to check whether or not the organization is following the law. When there is some sort of a non-compliance, it is the regulatory body which imposes the fines and penalties on the organization, which is why it's very important to follow all those regulations as well. Next one is the ethical compliance. Like I said, ethics means following the moral principles and the standards of conduct. This could involve ensuring fairness, honesty, transparency, and integrity in all organizational activities, including interactions with the clients, employees, and stakeholders. Ethical compliance is about doing the right thing, and often it is going above and beyond the law, because there are certain things which are not imposed on us by the law, however necessary to be done in the right manner, which is why ethical compliance is very necessary in any successful organization. The next one here is about data protection and privacy compliance. Now, as we know, with the increasing reliance on the technology and the data in the community sector, organizations must comply with the data protection regulation and privacy regulation. What does that mean? This means that there needs to be some sort of safeguarding about the sensitive information out there, especially of the clients, and we need to obtain the consent once when we are obtaining the data from the client. And this data that we are collecting should be processed in a proper manner, stored and recorded in a proper manner while complying with the laws, for example, GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So this is all covered under the data protection and privacy compliance. The last one and the fifth one is the environmental compliance. Many organizations these days are focused on that, because in community sector we may have some sort of environmental responsibilities. This could be simply managing the waste, or reducing the carbon footprint, or complying with the environmental regulations which are applicable to the operations. These environmental laws help us understand how sustainability is important and how sustainable practices should be promoted in the organization. Now, it is important to note that these are not the only types of compliance which I have covered in this video, and there could be many more. However, these are very much relevant to the community services and this industry. And other compliance areas such as financial compliance or HR compliance can also come in picture. Now, when we are compliant and we're following the rule, what could be the possible benefits? The benefits can start with the efficiency and productivity of the organization. We become more efficient in the daily nature of the work. It helps us creating good workplace culture also, where everyone follows the internal policy and procedure. When there are no abiding by the internal policies, that often results in breach of the code of conducts and the standards given by the government. It also helps organization to uphold its values. When it comes to the ethical compliance, it is very important that the individual's personal values are also aligned with the organization values. Lastly, it also impacts the brand reputation and reduces the risk of any sort of penalties, big consequences like cancellations or losing the registrations or getting the business closed. So, here are the key benefits of compliance, which is why compliance is very important and it is something that needs to be dealt with very carefully. And with this, we have covered what compliance is, what was the types of the compliance, and how it needs to be ensured